Hi, Dave.
Hi, Carrie. How you doing?
I'm good. I like
Good.
your background.
Thank you. That's.
I wish.
And
I wish we could be there.
What team?
That's the Giants ballpark in San Francisco, Oracle.
Okay, I'm an A's fan.
No, it's all right too. I like the A's as well.
Okay. Did Trish say we're streaming?
We are.
Yes.
Give me just one moment so I can share the link out. Okay, we can get started.
Okay, hello, this is Carrie Waddy, and I would like to call the meeting to order. And would you please follow me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Tom O'Gorman.
Laura Lee George, Hoopa.
Rob Wild, Rich Beck.
Carrie Waddy Salyer. Martha, are you there?
Darlene, unmute.
Martha, are you on mute?
I'm not able to unmute Darlene.
Then we only have 3 people here.
No, she's getting it. There we go.
Darlene McGee.
But you know she's here, so I can,
Right, you can see her.
okay, so we have 4 people. We have a quorum.
We do have a quorum.
All right. Item 1C, adoption of agenda. Call for adoption of agenda. Who would like to make the motion?
This is Tom. I move we adopt the agenda.
This is Rob Wild. I second that.
Discussion? If not, I call for the vote. Tom,
Yes.
Laura Lee,
Yes,
Carrie, yes. Darlene,
Muted.
I think Darlene got dropped. Let me see her video.
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
oh, there. She said yes. We
Yeah,
have,
I say you.
okay, it's unanimous. Passes 4-0. Moving on to item 2, information.
Point of order. Point of order.
Yes, Tom?
Carrie, I think, did you miss Rob?
No.
Oh, I did miss Rob.
Well, I vote yes.
Okay. So that was 5-0. Thank you very much, Tom. Item 2A, superintendent's report.
Hey, I have about 5 things to just update you all with. A lot of the topics are intertwined, having to do with health and safety, the plan for reopening. So I'm going to start with that, just to inform you that I've been working with the school nurse and Missy M and MTO just to continue to do the safe reopening plan. We have a template that we're using from our document tracking services, and it's a really good checklist just to say, do you have the following? And it's for reopening, and it doesn't mean reopening in the sense of all students and all teachers, all staff on the campus is working. It's, you know, whatever phase we're at, because we're doing this, you know, slow reintroduction to people being on campus. So that is kind of looking forward. So if we are at the point where we're going to be making a recommendation to bring cohorts of students onto campus, we have the things set up ahead of time. So it's kind of a constantly evolving process. What we have done in terms of reopening that has been less restrictions than before was opening up the parking lots for Wi-Fi access. I was hoping I was going to bring you a really good report about how that's been going. But considering the outdoor air quality is so bad, we don't feel like, you know, there's less likelihood that people are going to be taking advantage of that. So we rolled that out last week. David Ellie came up with the protocols for people to be able to log on in the parking lot. We didn't have to add any boosters or anything. And we're going to see, you know, hopefully that will give people access that when they come to school, use their devices, get onto a meeting, or just be able to upload documents to Google Classroom. So that's at its infancy. The directions of how to access the parking lot Wi-Fi went home with meals. We put little, you know, printed paper flyers. And then there were accompanied by safety protocols. We're not opening up the schools. We're not opening up the facilities. It's really strictly using the parking lot Wi-Fi. So at the next meeting, I can give you more information about usage and how much more that has enabled students to be able to access some of the resources, which we know are limited by the limited internet access. The other thing in terms of home internet, I had a meeting with Linnea Jackson today to talk about the Hoopa Tribes initiative to get the sudden link, the towers. And so they're really interested in knowing what students do not have Wi-Fi in their house so that they can, or don't have internet in their home so that they can be prioritized. And in for the immediate time, we're looking at ordering hotspots. Carmi was able to go through the LA Unified School District's Verizon partnership. I don't know, Carmi, if you want to have any more language for that, but she got a great deal. I mean, we've looked at a number of different options for hotspots, and there's always something that doesn't quite work. They're either expensive on the initial, or they're expensive to maintain, or they don't have the right kind of connection. And she found what we think is like just the perfect device, and is something that is designed for educational purposes in terms of the pricing and working with a bigger school district. So that looks like some of those immediate needs will be taken care of, and then what the tribe is doing would be, you know, long-term. And then of course, Yurok tribe is investing in their internet access as well. But I was excited to think about that. You know, we have the quickest fix, which is still slow. None of this happens fast, but opening up the parking lots is, you know, at least going to mitigate some of the internet access problems. So, and then the next thing will be us being able to provide hotspots, and then kind of the long-term permanency. And what I like that the Hoopa tribe at least is thinking of is, in addition to the satellite availability, it's that there's going to be the fiber optic lines run, you know, in the next 3 to 5 years. 3 years is what she was saying, because we know that there has to be basically redundancy because one of them goes out at some point. So does anybody have questions for me about internet? Carrie?
I do.
Yes, Carrie.
So is this just going to take, is this just, am I muted or not?
You're fine. I hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Is this just going to take care of the Hoopa Valley, or will this be available to the students down in Jack Norton?
It's a different initiative. Europe Connect is working on getting service downriver, and then the Hoopa tribes, their PUD is looking at in the valley, but she wants the data for the entire district. They just feel like the more information they have, because if there's going to be the signal bouncing from, I think it goes from Humboldt Hill through all the communication towers, you know, in terms of it going through Willow Creek, at least, I would say that that's getting a little more technical than I know. But so there's, yeah, the Hoopa Valley tribe and the Yurok tribe have different projects happening. But then eventually with the fiber optics, it sounds like there will be a connection there.
What is ours called, Jewel?
Great.
Darlene?
Darlene?
Uh, We have internet down here with the tribal services, so they will have some hotspots with those too that they're putting in.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
And I was on a meeting with Jim McQuillan today, and they're definitely, it's helpful because sometimes there'll be an area that is covered, but then there's a particular, spot that is not. So any information that we can get back to the tribes in terms of if you know of specific addresses where there's a lapse, and they actually are starting to develop these, maps so they can say, well, there's service here, 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 but then this one area doesn't have it. So one of the things that Linnea Jackson said today, she said, this whole situation with having to rely so much on the internet, all it did was show us what was already there. It just revealed, the strengths and the weaknesses. And, if we think of how long it took to build up our internet capacity to, what we were satisfied with maybe 6 months ago. I mean, that was years in the making. So to turn around and just have it, 100% available is not really realistic because of the amount of engineering that has to go into it. But it's like slowly. I'm really happy that David was able to configure the parking lot Wi-Fi because it's safe for people to use. It doesn't put our internet access points in jeopardy in any way, to hacking, because kids, it's for students, they have to log in with a student account. So it's a good compromise, but people have to get to the school. So that is something that is still a limitation we recognize for some people. So with regard to, internet, this ties into, this meeting is not open to the public in the traditional sense. Well, first of all, public meetings people just would walk into. Secondly, we had a number of Zoom meetings where people would just simply click the link and be able to come into the meeting. And there have been a number of concerns with that level of or lack of security, because I think when we started with the Zoom meetings, in the spring, there was more Zoom bombing because nobody expected it, and now we kind of expect it. So, and there's a number of protections that schools have done, and other organizations have done. And what we are currently doing with just having the meeting and then having it broadcast out is a pretty common practice for schools at this point. And I just wanted to say, we'll get to when we look at the learning continuity plan, but there was quite a bit of public input. There were 3 mechanisms by which the public can make comments on any agenda item. And we were really happy with the way that we came up with, the emailing, the traditional submission, and then actually being able to call in. We felt like that opened up the access. And at the time that the meeting ended last week, Trish said that was the highest viewership that any, in terms of attendance at one of the governing board meetings that she'd seen. I don't know if you got a final number, Trish. At that time, it was in the 30s.
So as of today, we have over 160 views on that meeting.
So
Wow.
that's more
Wow.
participate. Yeah. And it could be somebody looked at it for 1 minute and went, that's not that interesting, I'm logging off. Or people could have watched the entire meeting. We don't have a way of knowing any of that, but we just were, it was really good to know that it possibly increases the availability for, I know, and I've heard different things. Sometimes YouTube is not the best way to view the meeting, that actually logging into the Zoom it certainly is more convenient, but then again, that risk, in terms of if the link is out there, then it's open to anybody to, to go, to have bad intentions. And, we know that schools have experienced that. So we felt like this was a good balance. My other updates are that facilities committee met 2 weeks ago, and we're going to meet again tomorrow. So we'll have another evening meeting. Carmi, Laura Lee, we're trying to get Martha in there, and we're just discussing the focus is on the iTech building and just getting some background information. But even just that was, I think we were on a full 2 hours. And I think we had about 10 people who are participating. Some staff, we have some people that are not on our staff that are consultants and looking at different ways of, options for school construction. So that's continuing. And then I just wanted to remind all of you that we have a board training scheduled for December 19th with the National Council for School Governance, and plan on that being all day. It'll be an agendized meeting, so that, it'll be really good timing because we will have some new trustees at that time. And so looking at board practices, developing governance standards, protocols, because there are a number of things that the board does that you have discretion in, and just coming up with how do you want to have your procedures. There's a lot of things you don't have discretion in, everything of course has to be in conjunction with the Brown Act. So those are just my quick updates for everyone. The last thing is that I sent a memo to Lois Risling about the calendar, which there was a lot of questions about the instructional calendar, and the board adopted the calendar when the board adopted the calendar in the spring. And rather than having there's really no approval in terms of, because there's nothing material that has changed except for what we have to do in accordance with the law, which is SB 98. So I did in the memo that you received, that Lois received from me, which was included in the board packet. It just identified what changes we had to make to be in compliance with the law. And what that means is we can't, the minimum number of instructional minutes, for example, for 8th grade are 240 minutes. So we have 4 hours of school. Let's assume that we get to a place where at some point we actually have kids on campus for that long. That would be amazing. We can't have a day where we are dismissing kids early. We used to have, school would go till 2:45 and then we could dismiss at 12 o'clock, but this year we can't. Every day of this instructional year has to provide 240 minutes of instruction for students, which means teachers can't stop teaching at noon. They have to do the 4 hours. But it's still quite a bit shorter than, the average day. So it's just those adjustments, just so nobody's confused and thinks that it's an hour early dismissal. It's an hour early dismissal based on last year's schedule. So it just brings everything up to date and current. So, and then the other adjustment, which is not, again, the business calendar, it's just instruction, is getting on that trimester round, which is what all of the principals had been asking for, because it just matches up with their report cards. So since it wasn't, it'll be good next year. Perhaps we can adopt the calendar in March and it'll stay, but this was an exceptional year. So any questions on any of those things? Because then I'm finished with my report.
I just have a statement to make, and that is that with all this technology being added to our valley, and because of the distance learning, this is a good thing that's come out of all this badness. And I'm thinking in the future, when we have board meetings that are in person, we can have board meetings that are in person and Zoom, so that people who can't make it here can join via Zoom, and we're going to have a much higher attendance at our board meetings. It's wonderful.
Maybe.
I agree.
Okay, are we moving on?
We're ready. Yes.
Item number 3, action. Item 3A, Learning Continuity Plan, KTJUSD Learning Continuity Plan for adoption. Do I have a motion?
Go, Tom.
This is Laura Lee. I move that we approve the learning continuity plan for 2021.
Do I have a second?
looks like Darlene's going to second that. Is that correct, Darlene?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay. I have a motion from Laura Lee and a second by Darlene. Are there any questions?
Trish, wasn't there a public comment or is that for the next item?
That was for the next item.
Okay, okay. Carrie, can I just give a quick update about what you're seeing this week versus what you saw last week?
Sure, that would be great.
So last week at the public hearing, we got quite a bit of input. Then Dave and Carmi and I spent quite a bit of time going through any updates, and then Dave and I continued. And it was honestly, I was telling Carrie, for me, it was the most amount of changes I've ever made to a document between the public hearing and the approval. And I think one of the advantages is that whole having a week, because I would have had to work 24 hours to do it if it had been back to back. And so I think that was a good response on the part of the district to have that amount of time to make changes. What you received in the board packet and what's posted on the website is what says it's called final draft. It has yellow highlights, and that was Dave Lon's suggestion. He said, why don't you just put, make it very evident the things that were actually addressed. And so thank you for that, Dave, because rather than anybody having to look through and see, like, were these changes made, were there additions made, we did our best to highlight them. So with the final published and approved version, I'll remove all of that yellow. There's a couple of comments that I put in there were some weird sentences in the last draft. I made comments. I think, the hanging sentence was removed. And the other thing about the learning continuity plan is that it's the district's commitment to, in order to receive the learning loss mitigation funds. So Carmi completed the application, and I think it was just, do you want the money and will you write the plan? It was a pretty simple application. So this is kind of our obligation in order to receive the finances, which are designed to help us get through this period of time when, everybody's incurring more expenses. Things are just more expensive, just the normal operations. And so again, the items that are budgeted, like any budget, are our best effort to say, at this point in time, this is what we expect we will spend. So that, budgets are fluid and flexible. We have two business people on this call, and they know things have to change as prices go up or down or as needs change. But there are a couple of significant changes in terms of some of the materials for students. We put more money into PPE because we started looking at, we had more information about prices just from last week to this week. And again, they're still our best estimates. So we can continue to amend this as things change, because right now we're really only addressing distance learning. So once we start moving toward any site, in-person cohorted groupings, we may provide updates to this. But soon we'll be into LCAP season. It's right around the corner. And that's really, the big plan. So if you have any questions for me, Dave, Carmi, it's kind of it was more than just the three of us. Obviously, we got a lot of input from a lot of different places to build that plan.
I had a question, and that was, I know that our PPE has all of the funding for our PPE come in, or is it going to be coming in later?
So that is the funding that is identified here. And I think, Carmi, was the state's deadline was September 30th to get it to the money to us. Okay. We were afraid at first that they were going to say, hey, we're going to promise you this money. And then it was going to take a long time for it to actually come in, because, this is still under, we're kind of waiting with bated breath to see if there's going to be any deadline extension of expending the money. Because right now it's by the end of the year. the calendar year, not the end of the school year. Like hurry up and spend, which does, which makes the long-term planning a little bit harder. So yes, we have the money now for the PPE, and we have to kind of plan again. We have to be ready for an increased use. Right now, I don't think we have a huge burden on it because we don't have kids on campus. And a lot of employees, they bring their own masks.
And then I see that you added a few, items into the budget, like an additional custodian for cleaning and disinfecting.
Yes.
And then you, in one of the sections, you divided up the money more because you added incentives for attendance.
Yes. There was one part last week at the public hearing, there was the question about the SARB and with the student, which is the attendance review board. And I actually just removed the entire statement about the SARB because I didn't feel like we had enough information. It is a tool. It is something that is, kind of the industry standard of when you get to the end of the line with student truancy. But we didn't have an effective SARB board last year. And part of that was we didn't have, a full year of attendance. In fact, I remember I served on a SARB board on the coast, and it was during one of the PSPS days.
You're cutting out.
I am? Okay. So we took the SARB language out, and then one of the responses that was actually Trish's comment, she attended a SARB review with Craig Kimball, and they were really pushing the idea of incentivizing attendance instead of the whole punitive approach. So that's why that got put in, because she, as a member of the public, made that recommendation, and it was in combination with, just asking why is SARB in here. And so SARB's kind of constantly doing that, I think it's reinventing itself. So that was, I think that the process is good. We got that input and we were able to adjust the plan.
Are there any other questions of Jennifer while we're going over this from the board?
I would just like to say I
If there are
appreciate all
no-
the work that everyone has put into this. And I realize that it's a work in progress. So as the lay of the land changes, we all need to roll with the flow with that. And I really appreciate the document that's in front of us. Thank you.
Thanks for acknowledging that, Laura Lee, because I pulled Carmi and Emily into a meeting, and then they'd go and work, and then we'd say, wait, we have to adjust. So yeah, it was a lot of back and forth because, we had to address the needs, and it's designed like the LCAP, but thank you for acknowledging that, because they, this whole crew has worked a lot, and people that gave the input that showed up to parent advisory committee meetings. So yeah, thanks.
And David Lawn.
And David Long.
Okay, are we ready to call for the vote? I call for the vote. Tom? Tom?
Yes.
Laura Lee?
Yes.
Darlene? Darlene?
You're muted, Darlene, and you have your camera off, so we can't see you. Camera's on. Still muted. Can we get a thumbs? Oh, I saw a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
There we go. Thank you, Darlene.
Okay. Okay. Rob?
Yes.
Okay, we have, it's unanimous, passes 5-0.
How did you
Oh, I didn't
vote,
call
Carrie?
myself. Carrie? Yes. Okay, passes 5-0. Moving on to item 3B, second HEC school model. recommendation for second HEX 6-week cycle of distance learning with allowances for teacher conference with individual students, October 12th, 2020 to November 20th, 2020. Call for the motion.
This is Laura Lee. I move we approve.
This is Tom
Second.
O'Gorman. I second that motion.
Discussion?
I'm curious as to what feedback you've been getting, Jen, from this first few weeks of school. I know I've been watching a couple of teachers saying that it's really a learning experience for them and that they're actually on duty all hours because you get phone calls at 9, students having a problem, and so that asynchronous classroom per se, where they check in with their teacher whenever is. I'm just wondering what kind of feedback you've been getting.
It's mixed. Clearly what comes up at every conversation is that if the internet were more widely, accessible, then perhaps some of those, errant calls would be mitigated because kids would be joining at the same time. And I think that that's another thing that we have to constantly look at for our district, because there's all these plans that the state's putting out in models, but they're talking about urban areas where you can have a Zoom meeting with all 24 students at once, and that's just not possible. So I do think it is still quite a bit of work. I got some feedback from Carrie today about, she was looking at some of the packets that were being distributed. She was there for packet pickup, and just that the quality of print materials has increased. I do not know that the requirements though for the teachers have, the instructional staff is less, because it's kind of this dual. And I think we're still at the beginnings. I mean, I think it's just a slow start, because we didn't start out with 100% of our equipment in terms of devices. Those are still coming in. We didn't start out with 100% of the connection. We didn't come in with 100% of the information, because that was, every time we'd say, okay, looks like we're going to do this. Oh no, now things have changed. I think it's going pretty well. I wouldn't say like, this is just amazing. I think it's still a lot of work, but I think that I'm hoping that people realize, people have had to also reshift their priorities. I mean, to making like their health has to be the first thing that they're considering. So that might be, I'm not going to do packet pickup, or I can't distribute packets because of, the smoke. That was just not unexpected, another thing for us to have to deal with. It seems there's more and more staff are working on campus though. So that I think, the school is really clearly the best place to have our operations working from. And now that we're a couple weeks through, the height of our localized positive tests, I think that we're going to be more and more efficient. I think that real heavy lifting was the first few weeks. So I think people are kind of hitting their stride, but there's definitely still some, outlying things and outlying needs.
Laura Lee, I connected with Vicki Kurtz and Benny when I was at Trinity Valley, and watching them pass out the packets and seeing how that was all going. And Jennifer mentioned that I got to look at the packets, and the top thing on the packet, on the top of the packet, was a little stapled section on how to navigate the internet and the technology that they have to use to get their students' work done. And it goes through how to connect up with the different apps and everything. It's just a wonderful addition. And I was saying to Jennifer that that it would be good, Trish, if all the board members could have a copy of that technology packet that went home from, I don't know if it's the whole district or just Trinity Valley right now, but I'd like a copy of that packet, and I'm pretty sure everybody else is curious to see what was in it.
Trish, am I able to share my screen? Can you give me?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I just wanted to show you all real quickly just a couple of informational points. This is something that I just basically created directly from the California Department of Public Health in terms of some of the framework for decision making. So the California Department of Health has these 4 categories of risk, basically. The purple, of course, is the most intense and riskiest, down to yellow, which they're calling minimal risk. They're not ever really saying no risk. That's not even something that's in consideration. So for a period of time, Humboldt County was at this tier 3, which was substantial risk. And then here's the qualifying factors: how many cases per 100,000, the rate of positive tests, and then what we can do. So it's really interesting to see that only at the riskiest level, at the riskiest tier, are there restrictions for schools being able to reopen. So Humboldt County currently is at this moderate tier, which means that we, according to state guidelines, have permission to reopen fully for in-person instruction. But fully for in-person instruction is not last year's full in-person instruction. There's definitely guidelines in terms of what a cohort means. So they define a cohort of 14 students plus 2 adults. So this is not going back to a classroom full of 27 kids. But so everything is really going to have some sort of level of hybrid. So what I have in this last column is basically what are we doing at Klamath Trinity. So during the most severe risky time, we were doing distance learning. When we had the second tier, we were doing distance learning only. And we're here at this level 2, this moderate risk. So we're going to offer distance learning under all tiers and all levels. That's going to be an option for families all year. We'd like to move to have distance learning, but allow for in-person meetings with students. And then we figured, down the road, after 6 weeks, we'll be looking at if we're ready to have hybrid learning options. And that, of course, will be determined by, are we still in this moderate category? What our operations look like. The other thing I wanted to show you was, so that's basically California's tiers. And then I just created something that it's just a draft, and it's just saying, here are the different instructional models that we have in considerations. So when we have distance learning, what the education part is, what the instruction is. So we've started with site-based special education assessments. The board approved employee supervised childcare, and we've opened up the parking lots for Wi-Fi access. And then the next column just says, what are the health and safety requirements? And these are the protocols that, Angie Brown has developed, works with Missy Ammon to have, the equipment. And then what we're looking at now is moving to still what we're calling distance learning, but allowing for some individual visits from kids and families. So this is basically the recommendation right now. Continue distance learning for 6 weeks, allow for individual conference. And what I have here, this next, little part that's under is how we would decide, prioritizing, kind of having a tiered approach. We have an obligation to serve students with disabilities who have that one-on-one or in-person instruction in their IEPs first. We clearly will want to prioritize students that do not have access to home internet. And then we have a responsibility to serve foster youth, McKinney-Vento eligible students, also homeless students. That's the traditionally used word, but they're kids that are eligible for McKinney Vento services, English learners, and low income. And then, of course, teachers getting to identify the students that they want to prioritize, because teachers are, kind of have the best eye of knowing who their kids are and what their kids need. So this is what we have, proposed at this time. And then we are hoping that we will be able to move into a hybrid model, which means that kids will come onto campus a little bit, and then they'll still have quite a bit of distance learning for their overall instructional minutes. But we know that that'll be a very slow start in terms of having kids on campus. We expect it to be probably a shortened day and a really small cohort. I don't picture that in 6 weeks I'm going to be recommending that we have cohorts of 14 kids. That's what we're allowed to by the state standards, but we're looking at doing like, a quarter of a class. But that's way down the road. So for right now, for this next second 6 weeks, we want to continue with distance learning, and exactly how it's titled there, allowing for teacher conferences with individual students. So do you have any questions for me about, the direction or the kind of the continuum of options?
This is Laura Lee. I think this is great. And I think that you need to share this, because I've had people ask me, well, what are we moving to? And I've kind of given a overview, but with this, it shows more specifically what we are doing. So how were you planning on letting the community know this, or what's next?
Yeah, it's kind of been in-house for right now, because there's so many specific operations. Like, how would we accommodate this? Because there was actually one group of people, myself was in that was ready to move a little bit further with having students on campus. And the principal said, the amount of coordination that it takes, we have to do it really slowly. So if we can move forward with this, I have Rhonda Bigovich has been asking me to call her back. We can print this and we can get it onto our website and put it on Facebook and actually like print it. That was one thing we heard from the public input was, getting things actually paper printed, not printed, published in this format, but actually getting it printed so that people can see, here's what the next tier looks like. So yes. Thank you.
So can we request Tricia to send us a copy of this proposal?
Yes, and this is just, and I collapsed a couple of the cells, and it says it's a draft, these are the proposals. So when you move into the next tier of a restrictive hybrid, these are just some recommendations. We may change these numbers around. So I always put at the top, draft. We may be ready to move to something that is more accelerated, but yeah. This is kind of a logical progression subject to change. Sure.
Yeah, I'd like paper copies.
I'll get you paper copies. Yeah, I'll get you. I have them in my. I've printed, colored paper copies in my sitting next to me.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I call for the vote. Tom? Tom?
You're muted, Tom. We can't hear you.
Aye.
Laura
you hear me now?
Lee?
Aye.
Yes. Carrie, aye. Darlene?
I
Rob?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
How did you vote, Carrie?
I did. I said Carrie, aye.
Mhm.
I did,
Oh, I missed it.
right, yeah,
Sorry.
I did it right after you. So I would like a motion for adjournment.
This is Tom. I move we adjourn.
This is Laura Lee. I
Second?
second.
Call for the vote. Tom,
Aye. Aye.
Laura Lee? Laura Lee?
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
yes. I got you. Oh, there's a delay, that's why. Carrie, yes. Darlene,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
passes 5-0. We are adjourned.
Thank you,
I want to
everyone.
thank everybody.
Thank you.
Right. Good night.